Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Well, today I'm delighted to have with us Donnell. Kurt is the president and CEO of Freestar over in, Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks for joining me, Kurt.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me today, David. I appreciate it.
Well, we're recording this in May 2020. We've obviously been a little bit of through the COVID-19 situation. How are you coping over there?
We're hanging in there. It's obviously very strange times. I never would have imagined you could shut the world down until everybody just go home and sit on their couch. But, we're rolling with the punches here and hanging in there the best we can.
Fantastic. Well, Kurt, why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about who you are and who the company Freestar is, please?
Sure. Freestar helps publishers monetize their websites. As you may know, the advertising landscape in digital media has gotten increasingly complex over time, where just about any time there's an ad sold on the internet, there's actually a real-time auction that happens in milliseconds where any number of bidders, up to a dozen or even 24 in certain instances, are vying to buy the attention of that person at that time. With that has come a lot of technology that optimizes that. And so essentially Freestar provides that as a managed service for publishers so that they can focus on the content and audience development side of the business and leave the ad tech and the monetization piece to us. So we run all those auctions, collect all the revenue, and then write the publishers a single check at the end of the month.
Fantastic. And is that your own software? Is it built in-house as well, or?
Yeah, so there is some kind of common frameworks, something called pre-bid, which underlies a lot of this. But we've built a lot of our own technology which puts certain pressure on the auction in the publisher's favor. Really, everything we do is to optimize revenue for the publisher side. Historically, the publisher has sort of been at the bottom of the totem pole in advertising. Everything's been very advertiser focused. We try to put the power back in the publisher's hands a little bit, since they're the people creating that content, making sure that we optimize the value of every impression there. So a number of tools we've built really help kind of flip the paradigm a little bit and help the publisher.
And what would a typical customer look like for you? Who would be a typical customer type?
Sure. So we typically work with kind of mid-sized to enterprise publishers, anybody from Fortune Magazine. We do some things, JCPenney's an e-commerce customer, Barstool Sports and that side of the business. Then we have a number of sites we work with that are more utilities, whether it's a solitaire site or a big site that's done really well for us right now called Worldometers that has been actually tracking coronavirus. So kind of anybody that's mid-sized to enterprise, we're very good at building kind of custom white glove solutions for them. And it's never sort of cookie cutter. It's always custom for their specific application.
Now, I know you've got your hub, your HQ in Phoenix, Arizona, but you've got people working obviously in New York and all over the US. Is that right?
We do. Yeah, we've got about maybe a third or a little bit less than that of our team is in Phoenix, and then 7 or 8 folks in New York, 7 or 8 in LA, and then the rest of the folks are kind of all over the country. We made a decision about 18 months ago that we're really going to go find the very best people at their job, sort of no matter where they live. The company's been heavily remote for a while, 60, 70% even coming into this COVID situation. So pretty smooth transition for us, making sure we had video in every meeting and everything, so easy to transition. But I think maybe we're a little ahead of the curve of what's probably going to happen here, where the emphasis is going to be on talent and a little bit less on location.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to hearing later in the conversation about your experience of keeping people engaged remotely, because you've obviously been doing it for a long time. Tell us what a typical day, Kurt, looks like in the business for you as the business leader.
Sure. I don't think there is any such thing as a typical day. So our company's still relatively small. We just crossed the 50 employee mark a few weeks ago. So everybody kind of wears a number of hats. And then interestingly, over the course of the last year, we either didn't have an accountant or an HR person for a period of months there. So I was picking up slack on the accounting side of things and then the HR side of things, in addition to obviously guiding the team. Big focus on culture, certainly, and engagement. I'm a recovering attorney, so was handling some of the legal things until we hired a new general counsel. So it really varied. Some days it was helping out on contract negotiations with whether it was publishers or people on the demand side. Some days it was more HR heavy and doing all hands presentations. And then some days it was investor relations. So it varied on the day, which I personally love. I've realized that if I'm in a situation that's just kind of rinse and repeat, I get bored. So the opportunity to help in any number of ways really suits me very well.
And perhaps has anyone in your own career, in your journey, had an impact on you as a leader, and how have they helped you and impacted your life?
Sure. I've had the chance to work with a number of wonderful people over the years, whether it was some really good bosses that I've seen that did a really good job on whether it's the empathy side of things or the creativity side of things. I think, as I was thinking about this a little bit in advance, the people that have kind of had the biggest impact, in all honesty, maybe it's a bit cheesy, but kind of were my parents. They really kind of taught the value of hard work early, the importance of being adaptable, and sort of the belief that you can go accomplish anything you put your mind to. My mom has really reinvented herself in her career, I don't know if a dozen times, but half a dozen times over the years, and seeing that sort of fearlessness to go just accomplish anything you put your mind to has really kind of instilled that in me. My career has been a winding road for sure. Started out as an M&A attorney, then went in-house as general counsel, pretty quickly took over a business development group and then corporate development and helped take a company public, and now really over to the kind of operational side of management. And I think just in life, you never know where you're going to go. And I saw that from my parents, and it's been, I think something that underlied a lot of the decisions I've made in my life.
Fantastic. And look, what as we said earlier, your workforce has been remote for a long time. How do you keep, though, particularly in today's age and going through this period, how do you really keep your team engaged? What are the things that you do?
A lot of things, honestly, that this coronavirus has taught me about leading a remote team. I think we had done a decent job historically. I still believe the personal side of relationships is vital. So we flew the whole company into Phoenix 2 different times last year. So you've got people together, they built that relationship in person so that when they were on video conference, there still was that commonality in a certain way. But I realize there's a lot of things you can be doing all the time remotely. We've started a guest speaker series, for instance, where every other week or every third week we're having, whether it's a business leader, sort of a personal development leader, something like that, come in and talk and just keep the employees engaged. We're doing virtual happy hours, if you will, every Thursday, where we're doing things like trivia or virtual charades. And I just didn't put together the fun elements you could be doing virtually. We've been using video, and I give the co-founders of the company a lot of credit, video extensively for years, which I think is vital for a remote team versus just doing telephone conferences where people can kind of space out and be looking at their phone and playing. You got to be looking at somebody in the eye, and there's that personal connection, I think, that happens. So I think it's a matter of finding the touch points you can in a virtual world, and if you do it right and you're very intentional about it, you can still keep the human element alive.
For sure. And it's going to become more important than ever now, of course. Bit of a loaded question, of course, but what's the biggest challenge facing business leaders today? But what are the other challenges around what's going on in the marketplace, do you think?
Sure. I think engagement, whether it's in the coronavirus period of time or afterwards, is interesting. As the world has changed, I think employees expect a lot more out of their employment relationship than just a steady paycheck. They're a lot more focused on being engaged and happy, and their personal happiness kind of plays into the work environment a little bit more. So I think it's creating those opportunities for folks to be developing themselves personally and professionally, and making sure they feel very supported along the way. And I think the empathy side of the business has become as important as the business results at times. I think it's really, really important to take care of your employees. And if you do that, they're going to work harder for you and be ready to run through a wall. So what that means now is the things like, how do you virtually keep people engaged? I've started doing sort of general office hours, for instance, where anybody can kind of come ask any question. Try to do that every few weeks, or the speaker series. Outside of that, I think transparency is important. We do an all hands meeting every month where we share a lot of insight about the business, and you have to trust your people to be adults and handle it with the appropriate level of confidentiality, but it also makes them able to make better decisions. So I think it really comes down to engaging them and empowering them.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of I've ever received. I think from a career standpoint, it's be yourself, and don't necessarily try to mold yourself to the person you think you should be. I think people can tell when you're not being genuine and as committed. And I know I did that for a long time. Partly when I got out of law school, I went straight to a law firm, and it was just not the right fit for me. But I was trying to go down this path that felt like the right thing to do versus maybe chasing the dream that was a little bit better for me, or just being my authentic self. There's boundaries to that. Not everybody's like Friday and Saturday night self should show up at work, but just letting some of your real interests come through and being genuine to yourself and pushing toward the things that you want to accomplish are going to make you a lot more successful in your career. And honestly, people are going to appreciate that authenticity.
Your industry is, being disrupted. I say disrupted. You're disrupting your industry all the time. It's moving so quickly. What really excites you about the industry, in 2020 and beyond?
It's literally what you just said. It is the fact that it changes so quickly. I mean, digital media in any real sense has only been around for 15 or 20 years. And so it feels like almost every quarter there's some new challenge to tackle. If not every week, there's some new challenge to tackle. I thought, I left ad tech for a couple of years to go help take a yoga company public, which was an amazing experience. But I realized I actually missed the constant change. And that's a beauty of this industry is we're all figuring it out together. And so even if you come into this industry not knowing much, within 6 months, you can be kind of caught up to speed. And after that, we're all pushing it forward. How do we get better? And, while certainly the publishers are top of mind for us, advertisers as well, we want to make sure that we're efficiently delivering the right message to the right people. What does that mean in a more privacy-focused world where cookies go away? I don't think any of us quite know the right outcome to that. And so as an industry, it's been fun to see people start to come together and try to solve those tough problems. And that's always going to be the case because the mediums change, where connected TV obviously has had a big rise over the last few years, and that's going to change TV advertising forever, and probably more digital, more programmatic. The app advertising space is changing to this more unified auction. So helping to solve some of those challenges, I think, is a lot of fun.
Now, I know we've touched on a few of these things earlier on, but what's the way? Is there any other ways that you really help your employees improve their well-being?
Certainly throughout this time, it's easy to sort of stay locked in your house and work 20 hours a day because there's not anything left to do. I think it's been interesting when a lot of companies have been talking about how productivity has been through the roof with everybody working at home, which I think it has been, and it very well can be. I think there's a little bit of a false positive there because people are locked in their house and can't go do anything else. There's a little bit of element of that, but we've still been encouraging people to take the mental health days and make sure they're getting outside. One of our virtual happy hours we're doing here, I think it's this week, is an intro to meditation and try to just expose people to different things they can do. Certainly encouraging physical fitness regimens, and we've got all the employee benefits, but I think it's trying to expose people to new things that might click with them. It's certainly not going to work for everybody, but whether it's trying a personal development thing, meditation physically, or just take a day off. And I encourage people to go visit the national parks, get in your car and go drive. There's a lot of things that we can still do here as the world is opening up that are safe, but also maybe get people out of their comfort zone a little bit.
I like that. And I think you're right. There's a lot of that's been going on in the last few weeks, few months. So be interesting to see how it develops. What is there a story or something that you've got perhaps from your childhood that influenced your work ethic in later life? I know you talked about your parents earlier, but is there a story or something that you've been through that's really impacted and changed the way your work ethic has been?
Sure. I don't know why, but I've always had a lot of jobs. I got my first full-time job when I was 14. My dad was actually building a house, and so I became a carpenter and joined that carpentry crew. Then my buddy's parents owned this sort of deli bakery, and so I would work there part-time also when I was 14 or 15, and then worked all sorts of different construction jobs, from carpenter to electrician to roofer, but also was still doing multiple things. So one way or another, it was just instilled in me that you just had a job and you worked to earn your money. I think I came from a small town in Ohio, and as I look back, almost everybody from the parents of my friends were entrepreneurs one way or another, whether it was in construction, my dad was a dentist, or lawyers, or owned the market. And I just feel like everybody around me worked hard. And so I was pretty blessed where I just saw that as being normal, and there was never a sort of silver spoon situation going on. And I think it's the best thing you can do for a kid is make them work for things and buy their first car and do that stuff themselves. And it hangs around in most instances, I think.
Do kids generally in the US still do jobs at 40? I mean, I used to do a paper round in England, but I don't think they do that as much anymore. Do they still do that kind of stuff these days?
I think 14 is awfully early. It happened to be because my dad was building the house. I knew the carpenter. That's why. But I think 15 or 16 certainly is a good time to get people out there doing it. My wife was the same way, where she had random jobs in high school, working at like Gordon Food Service, which is, I don't know, sort of commercial Costco back in the day, I guess, or working at the store at the mall. I just think that stuff of there's responsibility early on really sticks with you and makes you push hard. I do think there's an element of it that's just innate. There's certain people that just like to work, and as much as I used to blame law firms for it, I've realized I'm just a workaholic and I like to work. I like feeling productive and doing things, and whether it's doing, things around the house, building stuff on the weekends, or actually work a little bit more during the week. I just enjoy it. So there's
Fantastic.
productivity as a form of endorphins, I guess, or something.
Do you actually, you talked earlier about your remote teams and, looking to bring people in who could be anywhere. What are those traits then and attributes that make a successful person who has that ability to work from home, do you think?
Sure. I think something that I always hire to, as much as anything, is curiosity. If you can find somebody that is intelligent, of course, but is curious and wants to learn, and you can figure it out pretty quickly, I think, from the questions they're asking in an interview. Is this the type of person that's going to go chase something down out of their own just thirst for knowledge in a certain way? Those are the people that I want on my team, because they're going to figure out the problems as much for themselves as for the company at times. And so that's something. Obviously, just sheer intelligence and experience are important, but I'd rather hire the young, hungry, curious person than the person whose resume, in theory, looks better because they've been in the industry for 2 or 3 years. Ultimately, you're going to get a lot more out of the former than the latter, I think.
For sure. So again, might be difficult to answer this now because it's changing all the time. But what do you think your industry is going to look like in 3 to 5 years' time, and how might that impact your business model?
I can't tell you what it looks like in 3 to 5 months, let alone 3 to 5 years. I do think things are going to continue to move toward what's called programmatic advertising. Historically, advertising was sold sort of salesperson goes to agency, they sign a contract, email over the assets. And over the last 5 to 7 years, it's gone to programmatic advertising, which is that real-time auction that I was talking about, where everything's sort of done computer to computer, think sort of high-frequency trading. I mean, that will continue down the path. I think, honestly, coronavirus may accelerate that a little bit, where programmatic advertising you can turn on and off versus a big $1 million, $2 million sponsorship where you're planning it out a year in advance. I think flexibility and the ability to measure ROI is vital. So I think this will nudge that along. I do think the rise of connected TV will continue to change things, and sort of cross-platform advertising campaigns where you can now potentially tie programmatic CTV with programmatic desktop and mobile with programmatic in-app monetization and really build cross-platform campaigns will continue to happen here over time. But outside of that, your guess may be as good as mine. It's always moving. I mean, we have to address this privacy and cookies issue. Google's announced that within the next, I guess, at this point in time, probably 18 months, cookies will be going away. So there's an identity thing to manage, but that's sort of part and parcel of this industry, I would say.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that turns out. If you had your time again, Kurt, and you were giving your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would you say now, looking back?
It goes back to a little bit what I said about be yourself earlier, and don't necessarily try to follow the beaten path. I've ended up, thankfully feeling pretty successful by having to take a lot of twists and turns. I think the best laid plans never really turn out the way that you anticipate them to do. So I think it would be, I don't want to say chase your dream necessarily. Obviously, you need to be responsible and go build a career. But if there's something that piques your interest, go track that down and learn about whatever that thing is. And don't be afraid to pivot personally. We talk about businesses pivoting a lot. I've pivoted in my career from what exactly I'm doing a lot of times. And I think early on, I just set this goal that I was going to go do this thing. And then I was going to go to law school and I was going to do this thing and just march down that path without really thinking about where I was going. And nobody pulls you aside and tells you not to go to law school and be a lawyer. It's, a respectable career, but they don't actually tell you what a lawyer does. And I didn't have the self-reflection to do that. So I think it's follow the thing that you're really passionate about versus what people sort of say you should do.
Great advice there, Kurt. Kurt, thank you for joining us on the podcast. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, find out more about Freestar, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We put a lot of content on LinkedIn, so on both the Freestar page and mine, Kurt Donnell, or you can obviously shoot me an email at kurt.donnell@freestar.com, kurt.donnell@freestar.com.
Fantastic. And I see there's some great content, some great pictures of you and the team, and the beautiful weather out there in Arizona. Thanks for joining us, Kurt, and good luck with the business.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for having me today. Really appreciate the chat.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.